There's a tiredness that does not show up in any blood test, an exhaustion that no doctor can diagnose because it is not in the body, at least not in the way that conventional medicine understands the body. You can sleep 8, 9, 10 hours a night and wake up as if you haven't slept a single minute. You can take a vacation in paradisiacal places and come back feeling like you need a break from your vacation. You can have an apparently perfect life, with all the elements that should guarantee happiness and fulfillment, and still feel an inexplicable emptiness that eats away inside like a silent rust. And when you try to explain this state to the people around you, the answers are always the same. Maybe it's depression, maybe it's anxiety, maybe you need an antidepressant or therapy. But deep down, somewhere deep inside you, you know it's not depression. You know there's something else going on, something that completely escapes the vocabulary of modern psychology and traditional medicine. Rudolf Steiner, the Austrian philosopher and visionary who founded Anthroposophy at the beginning of the 20th century, dedicated decades of his life to investigating exactly this phenomenon. He discovered that there's a specific type of exhaustion that has neither a physical nor a purely psychological origin, but that is born from a much deeper imbalance, an imbalance in the very structure of the human soul. And most disturbing of all, this type of burnout is becoming epidemic in the modern world, affecting millions of people who have no idea what's really happening to them. To truly understand what Steiner revealed about this invisible sign of soul exhaustion, we must first understand how he conceived of human nature. Unlike the materialist vision that dominates our time, which reduces human beings to a pile of atoms and chemical reactions, Steiner taught that we are infinitely more complex beings, composed of multiple dimensions that interpenetrate and interact constantly. The physical body we see in the mirror is only the densest and most visible layer of our existence. Below this material surface, there are other subtle bodies that conventional science cannot detect, but which are absolutely real and crucial to our health and well-being. The etheric body, or vital body, is responsible for all functions of growth, regeneration, and maintenance of life. It is what distinguishes a living organism from inert matter. When you cut your finger and the skin regenerates on its own, it is the etheric body at work. When you sleep and wake up refreshed, it is the etheric body that has done its work of restoration during the night. Above the etheric body, there is the astral body, which is the seat of all our emotions, desires, passions, and sensations. Joy, sadness, anger, fear, pleasure, pain, all this happens in the astral body. And finally, at the center of this entire structure, there is the self, the individual divine spark that constitutes our true spiritual identity, that which makes us unique and unrepeatable throughout the cosmos. Now here is the crucial point that Steiner identified. These different bodies are not independent of each other. They form an integrated system where each part affects all the others. And there is a specific dynamic that happens every day, a kind of cosmic breathing that most people are completely unaware of. During the day, while we are awake and conscious, our self and our astral body are firmly anchored in the physical and etheric body. It is this connection that allows us to have conscious experiences, think, feel, act in the world. But this connection comes at a cost. The astral body, with all its emotions and desires, consumes vital energy from the etheric body. Every thought we think, every emotion we feel, every sensation we experience drains some of the life force that keeps us alive and healthy. This is why at the end of the day we feel tired. It is not just the physical body that is fatigued, it is the etheric body that has been partially consumed by the activities of the astral body during the day. And then comes sleep. And during sleep, something extraordinary happens. The self and the astral body partially detach from the physical and etheric body. They do not go away completely, for that would be death, but they move away enough so that the etheric body can work freely on restoring the physical body without being disturbed by the demands of the astral body. This is why sleep is so essential. It's not just brain rest or muscle relaxation. It is an opportunity for the etheric body to repair all the damage caused during the day and replenish the reserves of vital energy that have been consumed. When we wake up genuinely renewed, it is because this restoration process has occurred successfully. But here is the problem that Steiner identified as the great spiritual illness of our people. The season. What happens when this natural cycle is interrupted or distorted? What happens when the etheric body can no longer adequately carry out its restoration work? What happens when we use more vital energy than we can replace? The answer is what Steiner called exhaustion of the soul, a state that goes far beyond ordinary physical tiredness, and that cannot be cured simply with more sleep or more rest. This is the invisible condition that is silently devastating millions of people in the modern world, and it has very specific characteristics that distinguish it from any other type of fatigue or burnout. The first sign, and perhaps the most disturbing, is a persistent feeling of being disconnected from one's life. The person continues carrying out their daily activities, going to work, taking care of the house, interacting with other people, but all of this happens as if they were watching themselves from the outside. There's a strange feeling of unreality, as if life were a movie being projected onto a screen rather than a genuinely lived experience. Moments of joy seem superficial and fleeting. Moments of sadness feel equally empty. It's as if the ability to feel deeply has been anesthetized, replaced by a kind of emotional fog that covers everything with a veil of indifference. This is not a symptom of depression in the traditional clinical sense. In depression, there's usually a deep and persistent sadness, an emotional pain that, however terrible, is still a form of intense feeling. In the exhaustion of the soul described by Steiner, what predominates is not sadness, but emptiness. It's not the pain of feeling too much, but the numbness of not being able to feel enough. A person may intellectually recognize that they should be happy in a certain situation. They may rationally understand that they have reasons for gratitude, but the corresponding emotional experience simply does not occur. It is as if there's a short circuit between thought and feeling, a disconnection between what the mind understands and what the heart can experience. Steiner explained this phenomenon in terms of his view of the human soul. For him, the soul was not a single monolithic entity, but a complex structure composed of three distinct aspects that he called the soul of sensation, the soul of understanding, and the soul of consciousness. The soul of sensation is the most primitive and instinctive part, responsible for our immediate reactions to the world, our impulses, our basic desires. The soul of understanding is the part that processes and organizes our experiences, which seeks to understand and give meaning to what we experience. And the soul of consciousness is the highest part, where we become truly self-aware and capable of moral and spiritual reflection. In a healthy, balanced person, these three aspects of the soul work in harmony, each fulfilling its specific function while collaborating with the others. But in the exhaustion of the soul, this harmony is broken. The three aspects begin to function in an uncoordinated manner, like musicians in an orchestra who have lost connection with the conductor and are each playing at their own pace. The most common manifestation of this disharmony is a phenomenon that we could call thinking without feeling. The soul of understanding continues to function, processing information, analyzing situations, making decisions. But the soul of sensation is weakened, unable to provide the emotional energy that should accompany these mental processes. The result is a hyperactive but emotionally sterile mental life. The person thinks a lot, analyzes too much, plans obsessively, but none of this is accompanied by the vital warmth that would make these thoughts meaningful and motivating. It's like trying to drive a car with the engine running perfectly but with no fuel in the tank. The system is operational, but it's not going anywhere. Another characteristic sign of soul exhaustion is a subtle but profound change in the way a person experiences time. For those in this state, time seems to simultaneously drag and fly. The days seem endless while they are being lived, each hour stretching out as if it lasts an eternity. But when one looks back, weeks and months seem to have disappeared without leaving any significant impression. It's as if time were passing without being truly experienced, running through your fingers like water without leaving any mark on your consciousness. Steiner related this phenomenon to the function of the etheric body as guardian of memory. When the etheric body is weakened, its ability to record and preserve experiences is also compromised. Things happen, but they don't stay fixed. Life goes on, but leaves no trace. There's also a very specific physical symptom that accompanies this state of soul exhaustion, and it is important to mention it, because he often confuses doctors and patients. This is a feeling of heaviness or pressure in the chest that is not related to any heart or lung problem. Cardiological exams come back normal, x-rays show nothing abnormal, but the sensation persists. It is as if there is an invisible stone resting on the heart, a burden that cannot be identified but is unmistakably present. Steiner explained that this sensation is related to the disharmony between the astral body and the etheric body in the region of the heart, which in the anthroposophic view is much more than a muscular pump. The heart is the central organ where the cosmic forces of the sun meet the earthly forces, the point of balance where the spiritual and the material interpenetrate most intimately. When the soul is exhausted, this balance is disturbed, and the resulting physical sensation is exactly that, an inexplicable heaviness that no examination can detect. But what causes this exhaustion of the soul? Why are so many people in the modern world suffering from this invisible evil? Steiner had a lot to say about this, and his analyses are even more relevant today than they were a century ago. He identified several forces in modern civilization that work systematically to drain the vital energy of the human soul, and the first and most fundamental of these is what he called excessive abstract thinking. We live in an age of unprecedented information. We are constantly bombarded by data, news, analysis, and opinions. Our brains process more information in a single day than our ancestors processed in an entire year. And most of this information is purely abstract, disconnected from any direct sensory or emotional experience. We read about events in distant countries that we have never visited and probably never will. We form opinions about people we will never meet. We make decisions based on statistics and graphs that represent realities we have never directly experienced. For Steiner, this type of purely abstract mental activity is extremely taxing on the soul because it requires the functioning of the soul of understanding without the corresponding support of the soul of sensation. When we think about something we have directly experienced, our thoughts are fed and sustained by the vital energy of the experiences that gave rise to them. But when we think about pure abstractions, about concepts without an experiential basis, our thoughts must draw energy from other sources, and the most available source is the etheric body itself. This is why hours of abstract intellectual work can be much more exhausting than hours of hard physical labor. Physical work tires the body, but generally leaves the soul intact. Abstract intellectual work can leave the body seemingly rested, while deeply draining the soul's vital reserves. The second great cause of soul exhaustion identified by Steiner is closely related to the first: disconnection with natural rhythms. Human beings have evolved over millions of years in close connection with the cycles of nature. The rising and setting of the sun, the phases of the moon, the seasons, all these cosmic rhythms were embedded in our etheric body, synchronizing our vital processes with the great movements of the universe. But modern life has almost completely divorced us from these rhythms. Electric light allows us to ignore the cycle of day and night. Heating and air conditioning insulate us from the seasons. We live in artificial environments where the temperature is always the same, the lighting is always constant, and natural rhythms are replaced by the arbitrary rhythms of economic productivity. We work when the body asks for rest. We rest when the body is ready for activity. We eat at times determined by the clock and not by hunger. We sleep when the schedule allows and not when sleep comes naturally. This disconnection with natural rhythms has profound consequences for the etheric body, which is essentially a body of rhythms. The etheric body does not work in a linear and mechanical way, as we imagine a machine works. It operates through complex rhythmic patterns that need to be in harmony with the larger rhythms of the cosmos to function properly. When we force our etheric body to operate against these natural rhythms, we are essentially making it work in conditions for which it was not designed. It's like trying to make a musical instrument play in a key it wasn't tuned to. It may even produce sounds, but these sounds will be disharmonious, and the effort required to produce them will be much greater than it would be under normal conditions. The third major cause of soul exhaustion that Steiner identified is perhaps the most difficult to recognize, because it is so normalized in our culture that we no longer notice its presence. This is what he called artificial or substitute emotional life. Human beings have a fundamental need for rich and varied emotional experiences. We need to feel joy, sadness, anger, fear, love, compassion, wonder, amazement. These emotions are not luxuries or distractions. They are essential nutrients for the soul, as necessary to our spiritual health as vitamins and minerals are to our physical health. But modern life offers us fewer and fewer opportunities for genuine, direct emotional experiences. Our jobs are often repetitive and uninteresting. Our social interactions are increasingly superficial and mediated by screens. Our environments are standardized and predictable, offering little stimulation to the senses and imagination. To compensate for this lack, we have developed a vast industry of artificial emotions. We watch films and series that make us laugh, cry, feel scared, feel excited. We play video games that give us feelings of adventure, conquest, power. We consume social networks that give us regular doses of indignation, envy, validation. These substitutive emotional experiences are not necessarily bad in themselves, but they have a crucial feature that distinguishes them from genuine emotional experiences. They are not accompanied by a corresponding etheric body experience. When you feel real fear in the face of real danger, your entire etheric body mobilizes in response. When you feel real joy from a real achievement, your etheric body expands and strengthens. But when you feel artificial fear or joy, provoked by fictitious stimuli, your astral body becomes agitated, but your etheric body remains relatively inert. The result is a kind of dissonance between the subtle bodies, where the astral is constantly stimulated, but the etheric does not follow this stimulation. Over time, this dissonance creates a very specific pattern of exhaustion. The astral body becomes hyperactive, constantly seeking more and more emotional stimulation. But the etheric body, which is not receiving the genuine experiences it needs to become strong, is gradually weakening. It's like an athlete who trains just one muscle group while neglecting all the others. The trained muscle may even become hypertrophied, but the body as a whole becomes unbalanced and vulnerable. Likewise, a person who lives primarily on artificial emotions may have a seemingly intense emotional life, but this intensity is superficial and not rooted in a true vitality of the soul. Steiner also identified a fourth cause of soul exhaustion that is particularly relevant to our time: the systematic weakening of the will. Will, in the anthroposophical view, is not simply the ability to make decisions or force oneself to do things that one does not want to do. Will is a fundamental spiritual force that connects the human self to the physical world, allowing our intentions to manifest themselves in concrete actions. A healthy and strong will is one that can transform thoughts and desires into effective realities, that can move the body and modify the environment according to the purposes of the self. But modern life offers fewer and fewer opportunities for the genuine exercise of the will. Most of us live in environments where almost everything is already done, where our basic needs are met by automated systems that do not require our active participation. Think of the difference between lighting a fire and flipping a light switch. Both actions result in enlightenment, but the internal experience is completely different. Lighting a fire requires planning, collecting materials, preparing the site, and mastering a specific technique. Each step of the process requires the active engagement of will, and the end result is a genuine achievement that strengthens the sense of capability and effectiveness. Flipping a switch requires none of that. It is an almost automatic gesture that involves practically no exercise of will. The result is the same in practical terms, but the effect on the soul is radically different. Now multiply that example by all the conveniences of modern life: ready-to-eat food, motorized transportation, instant communication, on-demand entertainment. Each of these conveniences saves us physical and mental effort, but it also deprives us of opportunities to exercise and strengthen the will. Over time, a will that is not exercised regularly begins to atrophy, just like a muscle that is not used. And a weakened will has direct consequences for the health of the soul. This is because will is the force that anchors the self in the physical body, which maintains the connection between our spiritual identity and our material existence. When the will weakens, this connection becomes more tenuous. The self begins to float, to disconnect from Seele of the body in everyday life. And this is exactly the experience that many people describe when they talk about their state of exhaustion: the feeling of being disconnected from one's life, of being a spectator rather than a participant, of existing without actually living. There's also a fifth cause of soul exhaustion that Steiner considered especially insidious because it disguises itself as spirituality. This is what we could call passive mysticism or consumer spirituality. Many people who intuitively feel that something is missing in their lives seek to fill that void with spiritual practices. This, in itself, is a healthy and legitimate impulse. The problem arises when these spiritual practices are approached with the same consumerist mentality that characterizes the rest of modern life. Rather than engaging in a genuine spiritual work that requires effort, discipline, and personal transformation, one seeks spiritual experiences that can be consumed passively. Weekend workshops that promise instant enlightenment, meditation apps that give you inner peace in 10 minutes a day, self-help books that guarantee effortless transformation, spiritual retreats that function more like emotional spas than true schools of inner development. Steiner was very clear about this. There is no shortcut to genuine spiritual development. Transforming the soul is hard work that requires the total engagement of will, feeling, and thought. Spiritual practices that promise quick and easy results not only fail to produce real development, they can actually worsen the problem of soul exhaustion. This is because they create an illusion of spiritual progress that temporarily satisfies the inner quest without actually nourishing the soul. It's like trying to satisfy your hunger with artificial food that has flavor but no nutrients. Hunger momentarily seems satisfied, but the body remains malnourished, and eventually hunger returns with even more intensity. Having understood the causes of soul exhaustion, we can now examine its symptoms and manifestations in more detail. Steiner described a very specific pattern of deterioration that follows recognizable stages. The first stage is what we could call the compensation phase. At this early stage, the soul still has enough resources to mask its exhaustion. The person may feel that something is not right. They may have moments of inexplicable fatigue or emotional emptiness, but these moments are sporadic and can easily be attributed to external causes. The instinctive strategy at this stage is compensation. Work harder, try harder. Seek more stimulation, more activities, more distractions. And often this strategy works, at least for a while. The person can maintain their productivity, their relationships, their appearance of normality. But beneath this functional surface, vital reserves are being progressively depleted. The second stage is the oscillation phase. Here, the ability to compensate begins to fail, and the person begins to experience more dramatic fluctuations in their condition. There may be days or weeks when everything seems relatively fine, followed by periods of meltdown when even the simplest tasks seem impossible. A person may feel full of energy and enthusiasm one moment and completely exhausted the next, with no apparent reason for the change. These swings are particularly confusing because they don't follow any logical or predictable pattern. At this stage, the person often begins to search for explanations and solutions. You can consult doctors, take tests, try supplements and treatments. And here, a cruel paradox arises. The more the person tries to find and solve the problem, the more they may be worsening the situation. Because the frantic search for solutions is in itself an act that consumes vital energy. The third stage is what we could call the fragmentation phase. At this point, the harmony between the different aspects of the soul is seriously compromised. The person may feel as if different parts of themselves are in conflict, as if there are several dissenting inner voices instead of a unified identity. Thoughts become repetitive and obsessive, spinning in circles without reaching any conclusion. Emotions become unpredictable and disproportionate, arising at inappropriate times or failing to emerge when expected. The will becomes erratic, oscillating between complete paralysis and compulsive impulses. It is at this stage that symptoms that modern psychiatry classifies as anxiety or depression often appear. But Steiner would insist that treating these symptoms as mental disorders to be medicated is missing the point entirely. Symptoms are not the problem. They are signs that there is a more serious problem. Deep. The fourth and most serious stage is what Steiner called the desiccation phase. Here, the etheric body is so weakened that it has lost its ability to self-regenerate. Even with rest, even with removal of the causes of exhaustion, the person cannot recover. It is as if the very source of vitality has dried up, leaving only an inner desert where there once was a flourishing garden. At this stage, physical symptoms become more pronounced. There may be chronic health problems that resist all treatments. The physical body, deprived of adequate support from the etheric body, begins to deteriorate in ways that conventional medicine has difficulty explaining or treating. But even at this advanced stage, Steiner insisted that recovery was possible. The human soul has extraordinary resilience, and the etheric body, although it may be severely weakened, is rarely completely destroyed while the person is still alive. The way back, however, is neither easy nor quick. It requires a fundamental reorientation of life, a change not only in specific behaviors, but in the entire attitude towards existence. The first fundamental principle that Steiner emphasized for healing is the need to recognize the spiritual reality of the problem. As long as a person continues to think of their condition only in physical or psychological terms, as long as they continue to seek purely material solutions, they will be working against themselves. This recognition in itself is therapeutic because it frees the person from the frantic search for a solution that does not exist on the plane where they are looking. The second principle is the restoration of natural rhythms. The etheric body needs rhythm to function properly, and the most basic and essential rhythm is the cycle of sleep and wakefulness synchronized with the cycle of the sun. This means making a genuine effort to sleep when it's dark and be awake when it's light. It means drastically reducing exposure to strong artificial light at night. It means creating a consistent sleep routine that is respected every day. Without a healthy sleep rhythm, no other intervention will have its full effect. The third principle is what Steiner called thought hygiene. The solution is not to stop thinking, but to transform the quality of thinking. This means deliberately reducing the amount of abstract information we consume. Less news, less social media, less content that exists only to stimulate the mind without nourishing it. And it means cultivating ways of thinking that are rooted in direct experience. Steiner recommended specific exercises for this. One of the simplest and most effective is the pure observation exercise. Choose a natural object, a plant, a stone, an animal. Observe this object with full attention for several minutes, without trying to analyze it, classify it, or think about it. Just observe, letting your senses absorb all the details. This simple exercise trains the mind to function in direct connection with sensory experience, rather than operating in a vacuum of pure abstraction. The fourth principle is the reconstitution of authentic emotional life. This requires courage because it means exposing yourself to real experiences that may be uncomfortable or challenging, rather than retreating into the safe comfort of artificial emotions. It means actively seeking experiences that provoke genuine emotions, being in nature and allowing yourself to be touched by beauty or grandeur, engage in deep conversations with other human beings, and allow yourself to be affected by their stories. Create something with your own hands and experience the genuine satisfaction or frustration that comes from this process. Face real challenges and experience the fear, determination, and triumph that accompany them. Steiner also emphasized the importance of cultivating specific emotions that have a particularly strengthening effect on the etheric body. The first and most important of these is gratitude. Genuine gratitude has an extraordinary effect on the soul. It expands the heart, creating space for more life forces to flow. Steiner recommended a specific practice. Every night before bed, review your day and identify 3 things you can be genuinely grateful for. It's not about pretending gratitude, but about training your attention to notice what really deserves gratitude. Another emotion with special healing power is admiration or reverence. Admiration opens the soul to receive strengthening influences. When we genuinely admire something or someone, when we recognize greatness where it exists, we create a channel through which higher forces can flow to us. Steiner suggested deliberately cultivating moments of admiration, in front of a work of art that moves us, in front of an extraordinary human feat, in front of the complexity and beauty of nature. The 5th principle is strengthening the will through specific exercises. Steiner recommended simply doing something every day that you don't need to do and don't want to do, just because you decide to do it. It could be something very small, getting up 5 minutes earlier than necessary, taking a different route to work, doing a task you normally put off. The specific content of the exercise matters much less than the fact that you are exercising your will against the inertia of habit and convenience. Another exercise of will that Steiner recommended is what he called thought control. Deliberately choose a simple thought and maintain attention on that thought for a set period of time, 5 or 10 minutes, without allowing the mind to wander to other topics. This exercise tremendously strengthens the will in the realm of thought, and the strengthening radiates to all other areas of life. The 6th principle is the need to give before receiving. Steiner observed that there is a fundamental paradox in the economy of the soul. The more we try to retain and conserve our vital energy, the more it escapes us, and the more we give it generously, the more it is renewed. The etheric body is more like a river that needs to flow to stay alive. When we block the flow by trying to retain energy for ourselves, we create stagnation. But when we allow energy to flow through us for the benefit of others, we make room for new forces to flow toward us. The 7th principle is the cultivation of a genuine spiritual life. Genuine spirituality is not an escape from material life, nor a search for extraordinary experiences. It is a fundamental reorientation of consciousness that recognizes the spiritual dimension in all ordinary experiences. Steiner recommended specific practices. One of the most important is the nightly retrospective exercise. Every night before you go to sleep, you mentally relive the day's events in reverse order, starting with the present moment and working your way back to when you wake up in the morning. This simple exercise has profound effects. It strengthens memory, loosens consciousness from its fixation in the normal temporal flow, and helps the astral body to properly detach from the etheric body during sleep. The healing journey of the exhausted soul is not a straight line. There will be days when you feel tangible progress, days when life seems brighter, and there will be days when everything seems to recede, days when the old exhaustion returns with renewed force. Steiner warned us about these cycles, explaining that spiritual progress never happens continuously and uniformly. The important thing is not to avoid periods of contraction, but to learn to go through them without losing faith in the greater process that is underway. Steiner compared spiritual development to the growth of a plant. The plant does not grow constantly and visibly at every moment. It goes through phases of intense activity, when buds emerge and leaves unfold, alternating with phases of apparent dormancy, when all growth takes place underground, invisible to the eye. Likewise, if you abandon your spiritual practices during periods when you do not feel progress, you are sabotaging the growth process that is happening at levels that your normal consciousness cannot perceive. This requires a specific kind of faith. It is not faith in an external deity that will solve your problems. It is faith in the process of life, faith in the regenerative capabilities of the soul itself, faith in the wisdom of the etheric body that knows how to heal itself if given the right conditions. Steiner often emphasized the importance of cultivating inner equanimity or serenity. This does not mean apathy or indifference. It means an ability to maintain a stable center amidst life's inevitable fluctuations. Equanimity is the ability to experience every moment fully, without getting lost in them, without being swept away by them like a leaf in the wind. This equanimity is especially important during the healing process, because the process itself inevitably brings buried material to the surface. When the etheric body begins to recover and the ability to feel is restored, the first things that often emerge are not pleasant feelings. They are old emotions that have been suppressed, painful memories that have been avoided. This is a sign of progress, not regression. Equanimity allows us to move through these moments without panic, trusting that what is emerging needs to emerge, that genuine healing requires the integration of all that we are. One of Steiner's most profound ideas on this topic is the concept of initiatory illness. He suggested that, in our time, experiences of profound transformation happen unconsciously and involuntarily for many people. The exhaustion of the soul can be seen, under this light, not just as an illness to be cured, but as a call, a forced invitation to a transformation that the person might never have undertaken voluntarily. This does not mean romanticizing suffering. It means recognizing that even in the midst of suffering, there's a possibility for meaning and growth. The person who goes through the experience of soul exhaustion and emerges on the other side transformed is not the same person they were before. She gained, through her suffering, an understanding and compassion that she could not have obtained otherwise. Steiner also reminded us that we do not need to be in perfect spiritual health to begin the work of healing. It is through practice, imperfect and irregular, as it inevitably will be at first, that recovery happens. Don't wait to be ready. Don't wait for the perfect moment. A weakened will not give you permission to strengthen it. You need to act despite the lack of will, despite the exhaustion, despite all the internal voices that say it's not worth it. These voices are symptoms of the very illness you're trying to cure. Don't obey them. Steiner used to say that the destiny of humanity is in the hands of each individual human. Each of us is a unique point of consciousness in the cosmos. What we do with this awareness, how we develop it or neglect it, all have consequences that extend far beyond what we can perceive. The healing of a single soul may seem like an insignificant event on the scale of world history, but it is precisely through seemingly insignificant events that history is made. So if you've recognized in yourself the signs of soul exhaustion, if you've felt that resonance that happens when we find words for something we've always felt but never been able to express, consider this an invitation to engage in an adventure of self-discovery and transformation, an invitation to discover through personal experience what nourishes your soul and what drains it, an invitation to trust the wisdom of your own being, which knows how to heal itself if you give it the chance. The path is before you. Maybe it always has been, waiting for the moment when you would be ready to see it. That moment is now. Each step creates the path as you walk. Each step strengthens the ability to take the next step. The direction is forward, upward, inward, towards healing, towards fullness, towards who you always were but had forgotten. It's not depression. It's something more. And that something else is asking to be healed. The question that remains is simple. Will you respond to the call? There is something deeply revealing about the way our civilization deals with the phenomenon of exhaustion. When someone complains of persistent tiredness, the first reaction is almost always to look for a physical cause. Lack of vitamins, anemia, thyroid problems, sleep apnea. And certainly all these conditions exist and must be investigated. But what happens when all the tests come back normal? What happens when the body is apparently healthy, but the person continues to feel completely exhausted? In most cases, the next step is psychiatric treatment of the problem. If it is not physical, it must be mental. Depression, anxiety, burnout, and then come antidepressants, anxiolytics, cognitive behavioral therapy. And again, all of these interventions have their legitimate place and can help many people. But there is a category of exhaustion that does not respond adequately to any of these approaches because its origin is neither physical nor mental in the conventional sense. It is an exhaustion of the soul, a condition that our materialistic civilization does not even have the vocabulary to describe, much less treat. Steiner anticipated this crisis with remarkable foresight. Writing at the beginning of the 20th century, he already saw the forces that would lead to this epidemic of exhausted souls. He saw how industrialization was separating human beings from the natural rhythms that had always sustained their vitality. He saw how urbanization was creating artificial environments that deprived the etheric body of the cosmic influences it needed. He saw how education was becoming increasingly abstract and intellectualized, neglecting the balanced development of will and feeling, and he saw how the increasing mechanization of life was reducing opportunities for the genuine exercise of human faculties. All this, he predicted, would lead to an unprecedented crisis of vitality, a crisis that could not be resolved by the conventional methods of medicine and psychology. What's particularly tragic is that many of the solutions offered by contemporary culture for dealing with stress and burnout actually make the problem worse. Think about the most popular forms of modern escapism. Streaming endless series that keep your mind occupied but not engagada. Social networks that promise connection but only deliver simulacra of relationships. Electronic games that offer feelings of achievement and progression without any real-world counterpart. All of these activities have something in common. They stimulate the astral body while starving the etheric body. They create the illusion of experience without the substance of experience. And the more we turn to them to escape our exhaustion, the deeper we sink into it. Steiner described the etheric body as an organism of vital light and heat. When he is healthy, he radiates a kind of inner luminosity that manifests externally as vitality, presence, charisma. People with strong etheric bodies have a magnetic quality that attracts others. They seem more alive, more present, more real than average. His eyes shine, your skin has a healthy glow, his movements are fluid and full of purpose. But when the etheric body is weakened, this luminosity goes out. The person may continue to function, may continue to fulfill their obligations, may even appear normal to casual observers. But something essential is missing. The inner light has gone out, and what remains is only the outer shell, functioning by inertia, but without true life. One of Steiner's most penetrating observations about this phenomenon concerns the relationship between soul, exhaustion, and creativity. True creativity, he taught, is not just a function of the intellect. It arises from the harmonious collaboration between all the subtle bodies of the human being. The etheric body provides vital energy, the primordial creative impulse. The astral body contributes sensitivity, the ability to perceive nuances and possibilities, and the self organizes and directs this process, giving form and purpose to creation. When the etheric body is weakened, creativity is one of the first victims. The person may still have ideas, may still be capable of competent technical execution, but something essential is missing. The creative spark, that indefinable quality that distinguishes a truly inspired work from a mere competent production, is simply no longer available. This has profound implications for our understanding of the contemporary cultural crisis. We live in a time of massive cultural production. More books are published, more music is released, more films are produced than at any previous period in human history. And yet, there is a pervasive feeling that something is missing, that despite all this quantitative abundance, there is a qualitative scarcity. Where are the great artists of our time? Where are the works that transform consciousness and define generations? Steiner would probably say that the answer lies precisely in the epidemic of soul exhaustion. A civilization whose souls are collectively exhausted simply does not have the vital energy necessary to produce truly transformative culture. It can produce efficient entertainment, it can produce cultural consumables that temporarily satisfy, but it cannot produce art in the highest sense of the term. The same logic applies to human relationships. Steiner observed that true intimacy, true connection between human beings, requires a significant investment of etheric energy. When we meet another person, our etheric bodies touch and interact, exchanging life forces in a process that can be mutually nourishing or mutually draining. Healthy relationships are those in which this exchange is balanced, where each person gives and receives in approximately equal proportions. But when a person's etheric body is weakened, they tend to become draining on others, consuming more energy than they are able to give. And this creates a vicious circle. The more exhausted a person is, the more they drain others, the more others withdraw from them, the more isolated they become, and the more their exhaustion deepens. This phenomenon helps explain the epidemic of loneliness that characterizes our time. Never before in human history have there been so many people living alone, so many people reporting feelings of isolation and disconnection. And it's not for lack of connection opportunities. We have more means of communication than any previous generation. We can be in instant contact with people anywhere in the world. And yet, we feel more alone than ever. The reason, from Steiner's perspective, is that true human connection requires more than communication. It requires the real presence of healthy etheric bodies, capable of meeting and nourishing each other. And when these bodies are weakened, more frequent communication cannot make up for what is missing. There is also a deeper spiritual dimension to this discussion that Steiner considered essential. He taught that the human being does not exist isolated in the cosmos, but is in constant interaction with spiritual beings and forces of diverse natures. Some of these forces are beneficial, nourishing and strengthening the human soul. Others are obstructive, seeking to impede or divert human development. And there is a specific category of beings that Steiner called Ahrimanic spirits, entities that work to densify and materialize human consciousness, moving it away from its higher spiritual dimensions. According to Steiner, modern civilization is deeply influenced by these Ahrimanic forces. Technology, mechanization, intellectual abstraction, philosophical materialism all reflect and serve the purposes of these entities. And the exhaustion of the soul can be seen, in this light, as one of the effects of this Ahrimanic influence. An exhausted soul is a soul that has lost contact with the spiritual sources of renewal and is increasingly trapped in the purely material world. This does not mean demonizing technology or dismissing the modern world as inherently evil. Steiner was very clear about this. Ahrimanic forces are not simply evil, they have a legitimate role in cosmic development related to the consolidation and materialization necessary for certain evolutionary stages. The problem arises when these forces operate without counterbalance, when they dominate civilization unilaterally. What is needed is not rejection, but balance. And this balance can only be achieved through a conscious cultivation of the spiritual dimensions of existence that materialistic culture tends to deny or ignore. One practice that Steiner considered particularly valuable for this cultivation is what he called living thinking. Ordinary, abstract, and intellectual thought is dead thought in the sense that it operates with fixed and static concepts. Live thinking is one that can follow the processes of transformation of reality, that thinks in terms of development and metamorphosis, instead of rigid categories. Cultivating this type of thinking is extremely empowering for the etheric body because the etheric body is itself a body of living processes, not static structures. When we think in a living way, we are exercising the etheric body, strengthening it, increasing its capacity for regeneration. A simple exercise to develop lively thinking is to observe and contemplate natural processes of growth and transformation. Observe a plant over the course of several weeks, following its development from seed or sprout to maturity and eventually decay. Try not just to see the isolated stages, but to notice the continuous movement of transformation that connects all the stages. Try to feel, not just understand intellectually, how each stage contains within it the germ of the next, how the leaf is already present in the seed, how the seed is already present in the flower. This type of contemplation activates thought capacities that normally lie dormant. These capacities have a directly strengthening effect on the etheric body. Steiner also emphasized the importance of what he called love of the world. This may seem like a vague or sentimental concept, but he understood it very precisely. Love for the world means developing a genuine and affectionate interest in all the things and beings we encounter, recognizing in each of them a manifestation of the spirit worthy of attention and respect. This love interest is not passive. It is an active force that leads us towards the world. And when we consistently cultivate this attitude, we are creating currents of etheric energy that flow from us into the world and return enriched. It is another manifestation of the principle that giving is the best way to receive. Love for the world simultaneously strengthens the world and the one it loves. The opposite of love for the world is the attitude of constant criticism and resentment that characterizes so much of contemporary culture. When we look at the world with judgmental eyes, looking for flaws and defects in everything and everyone, we are creating a contraction of the etheric body that eventually becomes chronic. The permanently critical and resentful person is literally poisoning himself etherically, closing off the channels through which the forces of renewal could flow. This does not mean we should be naive or uncritical. It means that criticism should be occasional and specific, not habitual and generalized. It means that even when we criticize, we must do so with a fundamental attitude of love and not contempt. The issue of digital technology deserves special attention in this context. Steiner did not live to see smartphones and social media, but his principles can be accurately applied to these phenomena. Digital technology has a peculiar quality. It is extremely effective at capturing and holding attention, but the kind of attention it cultivates is fragmented, superficial, and passive. It is an attention that jumps from stimulus to stimulus, never delve into anything. It is an attention that consumes without creating, that receives without giving. And this kind of attention has a particularly deleterious effect on the etheric body. Every time you spend hours scrolling through social media, you are draining reserves of vital energy without doing anything to replenish them. You are exercising a type of attention that weakens rather than strengthens. And most insidiously, the resulting exhaustion itself makes it harder to resist the temptation to seek out more of the same kind of easy stimulation. Creating healthy boundaries with digital technology isn't just a matter of personal discipline. It is a need for spiritual survival. Steiner would probably recommend regular periods of digital fasting, times when all devices are deliberately turned off, to allow the etheric body to recover from the constant stimulation. He would also probably recommend paying special attention to moments of transition, waking up in the morning and falling asleep at night. These are particularly sensitive times when the astral body is connecting or disconnecting from the physical and etheric body. And exposure to digital stimuli at these times can disrupt processes that are essential to the health of the soul. Returning to the central question that started this whole reflection, the invisible sign that your soul is exhausted. We hope we have made it clear that this signal is not invisible because it is imaginary. It is invisible because our civilization has lost the ability to see certain realities that are absolutely real and absolutely important. It is invisible because we have been trained to think in purely material terms, to trust only what can be measured and quantified, to dismiss as illusory or irrelevant everything that falls outside these narrow parameters. But the soul does not disappear just because we refuse to see it. She just suffers in silence, sending signals that we don't know how to interpret, getting sick in ways that we don't know how to treat. Until one day the signs become impossible to ignore, and we find ourselves forced to confront a reality that has always been there, waiting to be recognized. If you've made it this far, it's probably because something of what has been said resonates with your own experience. You probably recognized in yourself some of the symptoms described, some of the causes identified, some of the dynamics explained. And the question that now arises is, what are you going to do with this recognition? You may simply add one more piece of information to the vast archive of things you know but don't apply. Or you can allow this knowledge to become a turning point, a moment when something genuinely changes in your life. The choice is entirely yours. No one can do this work for you. No one can heal your soul if you yourself are not willing to engage in the process. But know that the path exists. Know that others have walked it before you. Know that healing is possible, not as an instantaneous magical event, but as a gradual process of reconnecting with the sources of vitality that have always been available, just waiting for you to turn to them. It's not depression. It's something older, deeper, more fundamental. It is the silent cry of a soul that wants to live but is not getting what it needs to live. And now that you know what it is, you have a responsibility to respond. Not tomorrow. Not when conditions are more favorable. Now, with the resources you have, in the place where you are. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. This step may be small, it may seem insignificant, but it is infinitely more than nothing. And it is from this first step that all others become possible. Your soul is waiting. She has been waiting for a long time. The question is, how much longer are you going to make her wait?